This is a show that brings to the forefront newsmakers, entertainers, and those making a difference in our lives and in our world. Each week is a new adventure with topics ranging from the most serious and cutting edge to the most lighthearted and entertaining.
This is Taking Care of Business with Richard Solomon.
Greetings, everyone. This is Richard Solomon, Taking Care of Business, and we have a really special guest this week. I am in the studio with Denis McNamara. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us.
Richard, thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be here on the campus of CW Post. And I must admit, I've been at the radio station here for a while, and they fixed it up really nice.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to pass that along.
Yeah, nice.
So for the people out there, if you were to hop on your computers and do a search on Denis McNamara, you would see that he is an incredibly important person in the world of Long Island, music, entertainment, radio, and all kinds of endeavors, and was one of the first people to really play the music of a lot of bands that are now super famous. Now, let's talk about how it all started, because I know that we're here today, but let's hit the rewind button and go back to the beginning.
Wow. Okay. Well, I was a kid of immigrants, Irish immigrants, born in New York. We lived in Harlem then, and so I was born in Manhattan, and then we moved uptown for a little while over towards the Grand Concourse, and then I'm still like 2 or 3 then, and then we made our way up to the northwestern Bronx and an area called Riverdale. And we lived in Riverdale, had a couple of different societal segments, so we were not in the mansion area, and we were not in the high-rise area. However, we were, I guess, comfortably middle class. I went to school with a lot of other immigrant kids from various places. There were a lot of, parents who were cops and firemen and taxi drivers in the neighborhood, and I had a very Catholic upbringing. And I, at some point, had my life kind of swung around. It just came at the right time and the right place, and this British band from England went on Ed Sullivan. And the Beatles really impacted on me. I had listened to their music. I had just started listening to the radio, and I became a rabid fan of the Beatles and everything that had to do with the British pop kind of revolution at that point in time in the 60s. I think I was 11 or 12 years old when I started. We were pretty free around the city in those days, so I would go to, I'd also listen to WMCA and WABC and 1010 Winds, and I loved those radio stations. And I was one of those kids that had the transistor under the pillow at night.
I did that.
Yeah. I mean, and for a little while, MCA used to have the top 5 at 10 or something like that. And I'd listen to see what songs were coming in. And I was always, picking up the charts at the local record stores. And I loved records. I bought records like crazy. And basically, I became encyclopedic about it, and in many ways it was just a pure form of enjoyment for me. I mean, I went to high school in Manhattan, and by that point I had grown up in music, it seemed like, and I started going to the Fillmore East when that came about.
Wow.
And there was a bookstore around the corner that was the ticket outlet from my high school. It was an all-boy Catholic high school. And then eventually I just started going to the Fillmore every week, it seemed like, and checking out, tickets were so cheap then when you look back on it. I think maybe they were $7 or $5. And we didn't realize we were never getting great seats because we were in some block owned by this bookstore or whatever. I had no idea how the business worked, but I started reading tip sheets and trade publications even back then. But I'd go, we'd always go to see the Airplane. And then we were there the night, that Led Zeppelin did their first concert opening for Iron Butterfly.
Wow.
And that was pretty amazing. And I saw Elton John open for Leon Russell and, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young when they went there. And, of course, The Who. And I saw The Who do the rock opera Tommy at the Metropolitan Opera. And then the Fillmore, unfortunately, it was closing, but I remember I saw Traffic there when they reunited and the Barleycorn record came out. So I was still in high school for that. And then I went to NYU. And at NYU, I had one stop, for like a year at St. John's, and I transferred from there to NYU because I wanted to be at a college with an active radio station.
What was the radio station at St. John's?
They didn't have one at the time I was there.
Oh, so that's why you transferred out.
So I transferred out. Yeah, I went to NYU because they had a radio station. Now, it was a shared frequency with WFDU out of New Jersey.
Fairleigh Dickinson University.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
And it's on the old UN frequency. So when the FCC divvied it out, they shared it to 2 colleges, and that's how NYU was on. I think it's still the same setup, basically, where NYU was on from 4 in the afternoon to 1 in the morning. I don't know why these hours were done. And of course, NYU missed, the whole daytime just about. And then the other station was on the weekends also, which I never thought was all that fair. But, you know what? I just lived in the radio station. I started working at, WNEW. I got an internship I was a journalism major at NYU, and I went there and, became very friendly with the guys in FM. I got to know Scott Muni, Richard Neer, who was a great, great inspiration and help to me in my radio endeavors. But all of them were terrific. Dennis Elsis and, Pete Fornatell and Dave Herman. Allison Steele was nice to me. I used to have to walk the Nightbird down to get to her car because there were people that might bother her. And I was always thinking, what's this little, Irish-American kid from the Bronx going to do if anybody attacks? Because, Allie was bigger than me at that point in time, taller, very sleek looking woman, very nice lady, and a magnificent voice and approach on the radio.
A velvet voice. Yes. Oh, she was great.
She invented a lot of stuff that we took for granted. But, and again, what I learned in those days, and I came up on radio in New York. I loved radio in New York. I loved the WMCA good guys. I loved WABC. I loved what ABC became. It was just one of the greatest top 40 stations anyone could have. And it was very, it was proudly a New York great station. MCA I loved, and I missed them because they were really hysterical in their day. I loved Murray the K and 1010 Wins. And I used to go to the Brooklyn Fox shows, where you could go see the rock shows and the bands would play, and you see a movie and the bands come out and play again. And sometimes we'd go like for the 9 or 10 in the morning show, and we'd stay there till 8 o'clock at night just to see the bands playing over and over and over. And we were really young then. This was when I'm 13 and 14. That's the first place I saw Little Anthony and the Imperials. Wow. And all these years fast forward, I actually inducted Little Anthony and the Imperials into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame at the induction ceremony, and we had become friends over the years. And they were, I always say, you guys were the first time I ever saw an R&B act live. It was the most amazing thing. The lights would go out and their cuffs would be lighting up in the dark, and they'd be doing all these amazing dance things I'd never seen. Little kid from the Bronx comes into Brooklyn, and this is what you see. It was just amazing. Murray had every big band there, and they did 3 songs and went on. I saw, when I got inducted myself in the Hall of Fame, one of those being inducted was Mary Weiss, the lead singer representing the Shangri-Las. And I remember being at the Brooklyn Fox and seeing Mary ride out on the back of a motorcycle and get off and sing Leader of the Pack. I mean, it was one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. I was like, oh my God, this is just crazy, I mean, seeing, bands like Gary Lewis and the Playboys and stuff like that with Leon Russell playing with them. I'm not sure if he was on that gig, but I wouldn't have known. I remember I met the Zombies. Wow. I met Cannibal and the Headhunters. I used to have a little autograph book and stuff like that. I love.
Do you still have it?
No, I can't find it. It's with my baseball cards, whatever my mom did with those. But you know what? I just loved the whole thing. I just loved rock and roll. I loved being in the Village and going to college there, during that time, of the early 70s. We'd have the most amazing people come by the radio station and hang out. Phil Oakes. I mean, the National Lampoon people, Chevy Chase would be up there, or Gilda Radner. And I can remember I had a Reef Martin come down, talk about making Rascals albums. And I had Dave Herman come in one day, and people were going crazy because Dave Herman was up at the radio station. It was just really, really an exciting time. I ended up, I went on and had a Carrier Current show. We had an AM at the time that only ran on the campus. And then just as the FM came, I had been music director, and I started building good credibility for the station and dealing with the record companies and everything. And I was elected general manager. And just as that time, we went on the air FM. And a couple of guys at the station came up with this great idea to bring the concerts from the new club down the street, the Bottom Line, onto the air. So I went in and negotiated with Alan Pepper and Stanley Sandowski, who ran the Bottom Line. And they were just wonderful people. And I think, they thought the whole idea was kind of cute in a way. But as they said, this is a way we could archive everyone that comes through the club. And, all these years later, it's been now released as a CD, thing, which I think is great because, they really, really ran one of the best, clubs in America, in the world, really, in that place. And I was lucky enough to be behind the scenes from the very beginning of it. So because of that, at one point, Muni and them pulled me in to try to ride herd on Bruce Springsteen's manager at the time, the one he had all the trouble with, because there was the famous live broadcast, the Born to Run live broadcast on NEW. So I ended up being one of the producers for Bruce's, big broadcast and everything. And that was in many ways where my radio concert career started, which was a happy accident. I was, I negotiated with the bands and the artists and got the clearances and things like that. In the meantime, I wanted to work at NEW, and then Scott Muni was helping me along with Richard Neer. And I was working on tapes, and I can't believe now, that Scott Muni was taking time out of being the most important rock jock in America to sit down with me and go, you got to do work on this, you got to do this, but you're getting it this way, and you need some seasoning, he used to say. And
what do you mean by that?
Seasoning? I needed to mature. I needed to become, less of a fan and more of a radio announcer. He loved the fan. I now recognize that after all these years, why he was putting up with me, because everybody at that station back in those days used to ask me what I was listening to. I'd come in and tell them about tracks. I was the music director at WNYU. Richard Neer was always talking music with me, and I'd have to, because I was working there, come in at 3 or 4 in the morning to change, the machines for the newsroom. There were a lot of machines in those days, ticker tape machines and the wires. And the wires were very important. And this was, back in the Watergate era. So I was working in the newsroom then for a while too. So I was running WNYU and working in the newsroom at NEW, and always spending time down at the FM. And I don't know when we slept, when we were in college, we didn't know. And long story, even longer here is that then, Muni had me send out tapes to stations, and LIR got back and he called them and said, you should hire this guy, this kid. He always called me the kid. And when I went to work there, I know how I got into this because of Murray the K. When I got into work that morning, I remember I went on the air at 1 a.m. First song I ever played on LIR, the Rolling Stones, Till the Next Goodbye, because I was being a wise ass and it was a current Stones album. And, boy, and so ironic in so many ways. And, the announcer on after me was the other new part-timer, Murray the K. And it was amazing. And, poor Murray, they gave him a hard time there, which was unfortunate. Cause I wish Murray had been around when we did the, Dare to Be Different format. Because I always thought Murray would have gotten that in a second. He would have loved that. That would have been his kind of thing. He would have been a great morning show. We used to talk about that sometimes. Anyway, that's kind of a rather long-winded but short bio from the early days.
I loved every minute of it, and I could really relate to a lot of it because when I was a kid, I had I guess it was a Radio Shack. It was a realistic transistor radio. It was probably 2x2. It was white and probably about a little over an inch thick. It had a silver screen. I don't know if it had much of an antenna, but I would put it under my pillow and listen to WABC at night before I go to sleep. And I remember one thing that ABC did that no one else really has done before or since, which is they would take a song. If it was really popular, they'd go, replay. That's right. And they would play it again.
Yeah. And they didn't do that for a long time, and then they dropped it, and then they brought it back. I don't know what the answer to that is, but the man who programmed WABC for a long time was a fellow named Rick Sklar. Very, very, a well thought of guy in the business and seemed like a good guy. I was very young at that time, but he wrote a book. I don't even know if it's in print anymore, about how he based running radio station like the NASA program, where everything had a backup system and ABC was run big time. And if anybody ever really wants to understand some of, how radio programming was done well in America and programmatics were done, and also the ability to match personalities and allow radio personalities to work within a framework. Rick Sklar's book is the best.
I gotta go read that.
It is amazing.
one thing that resonated with me is I got into radio because I was such a fan too. In pre-production, we were talking about Cousin Brucey. Yeah. And I used to listen to Cousin Brucey.
I love Brucey. He's the best.
And here I am interviewing him. And it's sort of like, it's like the full circle. You're going from fan to fan announcer kind of thing, journalist. So I totally relate because I've always loved radio. And I guess I grew up a little bit right behind all of that because, the first 45 I purchased was Light My Fire by the Doors. And I remember my cousin had the long version of it. And because Light My Fire, the
2 minute and 50 something version versus the 7 or 8 minute version. Yes,
exactly.
That was one of the first songs I realized they did that to. They did it to In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida and a couple others, but the doing it to the Doors, we all found out. We all felt robbed.
Exactly. So. What was the first album you remember buying? What was the first 45 you remember buying?
First 45 was I Want to Hold Your Hand. I wanted it and I got it and I just played it and played it. I owned a lot of 45s. And when I was a little kid, I worked at a movie theater and gave out posters. And if you put the poster in the shop, I'd give you a free pass. And there was a place in Yonkers, because I live right on the border of the Bronx and Yonkers on the Bronx side. And there was a place in Yonkers that was a jukebox rack jobber. And they used to put the records into jukeboxes in the diners and the restaurants and things like that. And they would resell the used ones out of the jukeboxes for like a quarter each or 10 cents each or something like that. And because I got friendly with the woman that was working in the store, I would put up 3 posters in there. She'd get 3 passes, and she'd let me take as many 45s as I wanted. So I was literally taking home boxes of 45s, and I didn't know who half the bands were. I had every kind of cool R&B, jazz singles, all kinds of stuff, radio edits, and I was listening to tons and tons of things, and I remember the joy of that, of bringing them home, and, all those colorful labels, and, in those days there were so many indie labels as opposed to, the giant mass ones. Yeah. And, that was so formative in my love of music. I used to listen to every A-side and B-side, and I carried that with me through my whole history of music programming.
Now, this is like the fastest, first segment of radio. This is Richard Solomon with Denis McNamara. We will continue our discussion, and when we go off for break, I'm going to ask him whatever happened to all those 45s. Keep it
yeah, and also I got to mention, because one of the reasons I'm able to do this is there's a WLIR documentary that is going to be featured on Long Island for the first time ever, after being shown only at Tribeca in L.A., where it won awards. And so we're going to tell you how to get the ticket information for that.
We're going to get to all that. We'll be right back. Keep it locked in. Richard Solomon, Denis McNamara, taking care of business. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Rory Cosgrove, and you're listening to Rich Solomon on WCWP 88.1 FM.
Welcome back. This is Richard Solomon. I am proud to say with Denis McNamara. We actually have in this segment of the show a whole studio audience with us. So welcome to all those people. Got Mike Epstein, FB. We have Seth. We got Peter, who's filming and streaming. So this is like becoming like world class.
Pretty soon they're going to open a club here. They're going to have a band in. They're going to start, serving drinks. It'll be fun.
Yeah, and they'll probably do it Long Island.
Yeah, that would be the place to do it. Anyway,
so there was this. You had a treasure trove of 45s. You were.
I was really, because I had this unique situation. I was getting all these used 45s from the jukebox. I was totally, into this music, and then when I got to the radio station, I'll be honest, I was spending so much money on music besides getting the free 45s. I would go to Fordham Road in the Bronx, get my albums, try and buy import albums, even at that stage in the game. And I would basically spend all my allowance money or the money I'd make. I used to work all kinds of odd jobs, like I said, in the movie theater. Later on in college, I was driving a yellow cab all around New York while I was the music director for WNYU and also working in, the newsroom at NEW and spending time with Scott Muni and Richard Neer and those people. So there was this whole thing going on all the time about the records. And the solution I discovered was by being the music director at a college radio station or at a professional radio station, you got all the records for free. So I figured this is great. If I could stay in this business and do this, I can get my records for free. And that was a driving force to a large degree with a lot of this. And then I loved the whole scene. And like I told you, starting to do the radio concerts. And then when I got to LIR, you know, then everything changed in a much bigger way.
How so?
Because LIR, first of all, was real radio. Even though college radio is real radio, to me, I needed to be on a real radio station, meaning a commercial station.
A little bit more juice.
Yeah, a little more juice, and just, you know, then you were getting paid for it. You know, college was pro bono, and it was great pro bono. But it was amazing to work at a radio station, you know, a commercial one. I always remember driving in at that point. I was living in Manhattan, probably down in the Village, and driving to Long Island and not really knowing where I was and getting off. And the way I came in then was so all over the place because I didn't know Long Island like I grew to know it. And I'd be driving in there and I'd be hearing the songs on the radio thinking, boy, in about 15, 20 minutes, that's going to be me playing those songs. And I got to be great. And, you know, we were freeform back then, basically. We had some basic thematics, but the idea was that you were really competing against the other DJs, especially because they'll go, I just played a great show and this and that. And you'd have to look at their list, figure in your head, okay, I don't want to play the Stones. They just played the Stones. I don't want to play Buffalo Springfield. They just played Buffalo Springfield. But I want to blow people away, so I have this new British band, you know, the Strawbs. And I'm going to play them and tell everybody how great it is, and then I'll play it into, I don't know, the Beatles and Hendrix to show, you know, that it matches up with them. The ideas of programming back then came from so many different places at so many times. We were so into segues. We wanted the music to dissolve like the greatest film. Not just not just an average film, but like a really cool foreign film, you know, that you'd see in the college neighborhood or whatever. And we wanted those themes to make sense, you know, about climbing mountains and going down into valleys, and we wanted soft songs and really raunchy songs and Jimi Hendrix playing guitar, and maybe you'd sneak in Copeland, you know, because that would be classical and cool and the guys from Long Island, or maybe, you know, you'd sneak in Coltrane, who was jazz and cool and from Long Island or whatever, but you were doing these, especially in the middle of the night, you were just trying to blow people away and be cool. And there was so many ways to be cool then.
So I got to ask you about the technology. So at that time, was it turntables and vinyl? And then you cue up one song, fade out, and then fade in?
Yeah. Well, we would, I don't know at what time we got it. We knew NEW had 3 turntables, so we got 3 turntables. And the beauty of the third turntable, Ray White and I were just talking about that recently at the WLIR movie premiere. But the thing was, you'd be staring at this giant wall of records. You'd be playing whatever you had on the air and thinking, okay, where am I taking everyone now? Where are we going to sail? You know, if Laura Nero's playing on there, do you want to really go to Joni Mitchell? Or do you want to go to Led Zeppelin, go into California, which is Joni Mitchell mixed in, you know, with the whole thing? You'd be coming up with these thematic things in your head, and you'd be, you know, studying every new record that came in, trying to get that across. And so you really, you know, you were really kind of almost mystical about it, religious about it. But even with the 3 turntables, the records would run out. There's nothing scarier than programming radio and having the record run out. You know, so sometimes you'd make the hastiest decision and decide, I'm going to just go for it, and you'd go down there. But the third turntable enabled us every now and then, if we thought of it, to have an emergency record on. So it would be queued up and ready to go when you suddenly went blank and stared at the wall and realized that the Beatles only had 1 more minute left on this track. And, you know, we didn't have all these fancy timing things back then. We'd be looking at the records thinking, it looks like it's about 40 seconds or something like that, I think. But you never know. The grooves can be tight. But it was a whole different dynamic. So technologically, I mean, hell, we were dealing with vinyl, Q-burn, You didn't want to have cue burn in the front of your stuff. Changing speeds on the records because some dolt would leave it in 45 and you'd put your 33 down. That's about the extent of the technology. And, as long as the transmitter stayed on and people knew where to pick up the frequency, that's what you were counting on at that point in time. Yes, we had cart machines.
I was going to ask something completely different, which will probably blow a lot of people away from the audience because they probably haven't heard this term on the radio in a long time. But did you guys have the disc washer? Do you remember the disc washer?
Of course.
Which was like the way to sort of remove, it was sort of like a delinter for the dust.
Oh, absolutely. We had that, and we had all kinds of stuff that you poured on it. Eventually you realized water was the best thing. And also we knew all the tricks of putting your finger, I have shaky hands. I've always had them even as a kid. But for some reason, I could put my finger down on a needle that was playing over a scratch and hold it down there.
To keep it
in groove and keep it going beat into the rest of the record and then throw the record out, afterwards. I mean, that was something that was always a problem in radio stations like LIR, NEW, and any of the freeform stations back then is if you had anybody that were, basically pigs with records, meaning they disregarded them, put their fingers all over them or left their bubble gum on them or, sat on them and stuff like that. Those were the people that you had to weed out and straighten out real fast because especially when we were getting in imports and things like that, they were irreplaceable. And we didn't even have stereo carts back then. I always, as a policy, when the stereo cart machine came in, I made sure that whenever we got an import, we mastered it as soon as possible onto the stereo cart as a backup. Because,
Brilliant.
Sooner or later, some mishap was going to happen or it was going to scratch or wear down.
Did you ever record your entire show and then sort of listen to it later just to see what it was like?
Air check is what we call that.
No, but I mean, like to take it home or do something.
Always. In fact, we had a skimmer tape in the LIR control room that would skim so you would only hear the back announces. You wouldn't have to hear the whole record. Because if you were and it was for your own good to do. Or if I was, as program director, if I wanted to listen to somebody's show, I'd say, bring me an air check.
Got it.
And they could give it to me. But usually what I would do is, on the programming director side, was go out for a ride in the car and listen to the air check with the announcer as if we were listening on the radio. And basically, that wasn't so much about correcting. It was really about teaching and moving forward. Or saying this worked, but why couldn't this work better? It was really, that was akin to directing, much like dramatic directing, like for plays or for movies or things like that, where you're actually getting performances out of people. But that was a different usage for it.
When you listened to your first round of air checks, what did you learn about your style and your voice?
It was all horrible to me. I mean, on a personal basis, I think it is to many people. In fact, over the years, the ones I find that think they sound really great are a little bit, in the denial area. No, because you know what? It's tough to get used to listening to your own voice.
I totally get that.
Then it gets tough to think, as if you can somehow be removed from it to actually be able to say, oh, well, this sounds pretty good. I would listen to a radio station like that. It takes a lot of effort and work and energy to train and then train others to do exactly that. Say, okay, this is just a radio station playing. Listen to it as that. And, it's self-discipline, but there's nothing that calls for direction more than doing live performance. And radio was, until most recently, almost always live performance.
See, that's why I have such great respect and honor for what you guys did because, see, I'm just a talk show guy. So to me, it's just conversation.
Right.
And as a lawyer, I'm used to conversation and I'm used to asking questions. So that's easy.
Yeah.
But to actually figure out the timing and mixing and tempo and going from like one, like you said, going from the Beatles to the Stones to maybe something a little more mellow, something a little bit more, enthusiastic, a little bit edgy, like, a little Hendrix, And
remember, it was always growing. Next week, Jethro Tull arrived. Then Grand Funk Railroad. Things just kept arriving and arriving and arriving. And it was a never-ending bunch of blessings. They'd come in and go, I got to listen to this, got to listen to that, got to, Clapton, Hendrix, all of a sudden these guitarists, and then, you move forward in it, and it's Van Halen and Johnny Marr, and all of that. But the road of music, and it matches with our lives. Our lives keep on rolling too. So, and you're capturing what you hoped back then was to bring this music that was so important to our lives into your life, into the life of the person that was listening. I mean, it really was as serious as that. Well, and as deep as that, even though we're still looking for hit records and, trying to play the commercials on time. So,
well, you're almost like sculptors because you're organizing the soundtrack of our lives.
Well, we were, before they had the machines do it now, or the satellites do it now, whatever they have algorithms.
Right. But it was actually your personal taste and style that brought all of that out there to us.
To a large degree mixed with the realization and hopefully the ability to go beyond just your own tastes and recognize that other people had tastes and there were other areas of interest that you may not entirely love, but you recognize there's a need for out there and a demand. And also it allows you to use those to also bounce off the great stuff you love and know so well and can mix in with it to make it a kind of not only a great experience, but a very comfortable one as a listener.
Jumping ahead just for a second, do you miss being in the studio and playing music and talking to the people out there who are listening?
Well, I do a show almost every Friday on USB for a couple hours.
Okay.
So that gets my Music Jones out, where I feel, I'm in this place now where I feel that there's a great deal of music from all of the LIR represented eras that isn't heard anywhere anymore. And I'm of the belief that it needs to be heard.
It needs some air.
Yeah.
It needs some
air.
Yeah,
and you know what? If I could put some of that out, and I do it on YouTube and, Facebook too. If I feel like for a while there, I felt the Clash were forgotten. So every day I was putting a Clash song on my Facebook page. Just because I felt people need another shot at checking out the Clash because they were really spot on in ways that we couldn't have even realized back then. And they are as, important in their own way as the Beatles and the Stones and the Who and Zeppelin, and the Clash should never be overlooked. And you know what? Unless people like I do it and other people who care about that music and its importance and that you want it to live on. Because what I have discovered talking to a lot of young people in the more recent times is that they're very open to great music, and they don't seem to hold the kind of prejudices towards it being old or somebody else's music that used to happen. There seems to be an openness now to just discovering great music from all kinds of periods. And you know what? It's happening in mass media. You're hearing music on commercials you never thought you would have heard on commercials. And again, all of this shows that there is a growing openness to exploring these fields. But, they're so diverse, and we have so many ways of having our attention taken in these modern times that there's a need for, there's a better word for it than curator, but that's what I use to describe it. People like me, I think, can be curators to great music that, should at least be re-explored and given to other age groups and things like that. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from now on what I would like to do with it. And I think, anything exposing the time periods that we came from, the LIRs, the DREs, the NYUs, and now the WCWPs, that these things, the more that they're expanded upon, and made available, and the more, that they are really taking this challenge. Like, I challenge myself if I do something now to find the best possible music, because I realize I may not get another chance to do it.
Well, what I've seen is that there's a tremendous hunger out there for good music and new music.
I'd like to believe that. I don't know that I know that, but I'd like to believe that.
I see that in many places, because when I was growing up, music was everywhere. It really was. And it was rich, and it was new, and it was expansive. And there never seemed to be an end to the great new things that you go to the record store and you would look forward to just accidentally discovering, hey, here's the new this album, or hey, the Starship just came. I would go to Corvettes, and wow, Spitfire just came out, or War Child was there, and because already had Thick as a Brick and Aqualung, all of a sudden War Child was around, or Adventures in Utopia, or whatever it is, and you'd go, wow, and now we don't have the Tower Records. We don't have. I went to Sam the Record Man in Canada. I think I bought up the store because the exchange rate was like an album with everything was like $5 American.
Wow.
So you go to Canada and you can get 50 albums, for $5 each, whereas here it costs you, 5 times as much.
Right.
So with that, I'm going to take a quick break right here. We're going to continue. This is Denis McNamara. So your show is on Fridays, or what channel? Where can people listen to you?
WUSB 90.1. I'm not on every Friday, but just about every Friday.
And you have a Facebook
10
page?
10 to 12. And, the Facebook page is under my name, so. Yeah, but and also in terms of the WLIR movie, I should mention that page is called Dare to Be Different, which is the name of the film.
We're going to talk about Daring to Be Different. We're on the other side of this break. We'll be right back. Keep it locked in. This is Richard Solomon with Denis McNamara, taking care of business.
Hey, this is Jeff Mattson, the Dark Star Orchestra, and you're listening to Richard Solomon on WCWP 88.1 FM.
Welcome back, everybody. Richard Solomon with Denis McNamara. So, Dare to Be Different. You're wearing the cap. The movie's being played. Let's talk about a little bit about the production, your participation, and all the events that sort of led to that moment.
Well, the movie was 7 years in the making. I was approached by a woman named Ellen Goldfarb, who is the director of the film and creator of it, and she wanted to know what the story was of what happened to WLIR. Because one day it disappeared and it came back as WDRE. And there was a huge and complicated reason that everything had evolved to that point in time. And it was not an easy story to tell. And what she has done magically in this film is gotten the story told in all its permutations, and also have about 100 famous people in there and some of the most incredible music artists in the world. I mean, Joan Jett, the Talking Heads, Billy Idol. I'm just amazed. Simple Minds are in there. Duran. I mean, Joan Jett did a song for the movie. It's called Dare to Be Different, and it is going to have its Long Island premiere finally in a film festival, the Gold Coast Festival. And you can get information about them online.
Where?
Actually, at the Dare to Be Different site is the best place to get all your info on the film. DareToBeDifferent.com, or Dare to Be Different, the Facebook page, and Dare to Be Different, or actually it's Dare the Movie on Twitter.
Okay.
But you'll find it pretty fast on Twitter. And that'll tell you, because the tickets are going on sale, or are on sale as this is broadcast, since we recorded this a little earlier. But this film's tickets are on sale for this festival, and it's taking place November 12th. And it's all around the Port Washington area where the film festival takes place. The film itself is really that story without spoiling it for the movie, but LIR always had a license problem. It predated my coming to the station. It predated actually the rock format of the station in many ways. And it was carried on by the FCC in ways that I make no secret of saying I think were quite unfair. And I make my case pretty strongly in the film. And I do believe that there was cultural robbery done upon the LIR listening area and the Long Island marketplace, because we were very good for it. And the government has a lot to answer for on it, as do other unscrupulous individuals. But you know what? It's an old story, as one reporter told me not so long ago. It's 30 years old, Dennis. Get on with it. But nonetheless, it's told. And I think it's a great lesson for right now, what's going on with the media in America, and the fact that we are at a crossroads in our history and in civilization with how we're going to be media related to for the rest of our lives and the lives of the people that are important to us. So, in that respect, I'm very proud of the film. I'm amazed that we got a debut at Tribeca, and it was a big hit there, and it was a big hit in its LA premiere, and there's all kinds of great negotiations going on for its future. The music itself had evolved. We had come to a point, and I've said this to you, Richard, off mic, but, those of us who judged music, because that's what programming music is. You make a call that I think this is a good song and people are going to like it, because you want your listeners to be happy. And we evolved in what was really the underground progressive world of rock music for a long time until we came to a crossroads that's explained in the movie. And we decided to go in a musical futuristic approach by doing what we call the Dare to Be Different format. And that format championed a lot of music that came from the underground, whether it was in the U.S. or outside the U.S., largely from the U.K. and Europe. And we were very lucky that it was a time where there was an immense amount of this music, and we loved it, and we went looking for it. And we took a very, very we are going to be the new music station, and to live up to our reputation, we have to keep finding new music. And I say this all the time because it's true. The only way to find great new music is listen to everything, including the bad music. And there's no shortcuts. And no one gives you back the time that you've invested in listening to all that bad music. And let me tell you, there's plenty of bad music out there in the world, and there seems to be more of it all the time. But nonetheless, I am still a firm believer that, if people go out there who are trained, because I realize now when I look back on it, I was trained by the best in the business, and I loved music. So it was an interesting, intense training, done out of school more than in school, in radio and the radio side and with the record companies. And you know what? I ended up being a record company executive for a long time, and I had a great time there and a great deal of success working with some of the biggest artists in the world, like Van Morrison and Andrew Lloyd Webber, and Broadway shows and things like that. And it's just an amazing thing to work with great music and to find great music. But when we were doing Dare to Be Different, we were really stepping out on a ledge by ourselves, and we did not have the support we once had by being a safe rock and roll programming major label record place. So we were getting imports from people like Seth Rudman, and we were doing concerts with bands that no one had ever heard of, free shows with Epi at my father's place, and later on at places like Malibu. And we were championing artists that people were going, what the hell is that? Whether it was Billy Idol or Madness or the Ramones and so on. And basically, we, against all odds, got a great deal of success. We became one of the most listened to 3,000-watt Class A radio stations in the United States at that time. We were hugely, hugely successful. And we had a dynamic effect on the marketplace in a cultural way as well as a business way, a very good business way. I mean, the clubs were fighting to get on the air. The car dealers were selling cars. I mean, it was really a good time, and there was a great energy. And Long Island felt very special by having their own radio station that was cooler than the average bear, So it was a great time, but then at the same time, we had this license problem and this legal problem that was always hanging over our heads. So it made for strange bedfellows and odd dynamics. And, there was a lot of pressure on us, a lot of tension, and it should have lasted longer, I always felt. It should have happened for a lot longer. It could have, but, that's the way it went. So you look back on it, and the movie does all of this, but you look back on it fondly and with a little bit of remorse because it was unfair, and life's not fair. But, all of us, I think, look back on it having been better people because of it, those that were involved in it. And so, I'm very proud about LIR. I'm proud of my career in all ways, but LIR is a very special part of it that it's always stuck around.
What was the relationship between WLIR and My Father's Place?
Oh, now that's a sordid tale.
Well, we got 10 minutes.
I came to, you see, 10 minutes, you can't do this stuff. That's a movie in its own right. I came to my father's place, destined to be the new music director. I knew Epi. I'd met Epi because I'd come out to see some shows at the club, and he was very nice. And I
didn't let you in on one show.
Yeah, you didn't. No. He took our tickets for a band that didn't play. And then the record company wanted them back. Something like that happened. But no, it was a delight working there because it was so easy. I recognize now. We did one of the greatest radio concert series in history, and really, I picked it up. These guys had innovated it. I came in as the kid that did the series in New York with the Bottom Line. I mean, it was the same basic thing, getting permissions, working it out, getting the truck in, doing the sound checks, listening to everybody bitch about the monitors, and then, getting it all nervous and crazy, getting everybody ready to be there on time to do them live. And then this incredible excitement of people realizing they were live on the radio with the bands coming from this magical club in some place called Roslyn, Long Island. It was, and I can tell you, people used to sit in their cars, wait for the DJ, which would be me or one of the other LIR personalities, to announce the show. And then they'd run from their cars and run in because they just heard it announced in the car, and now they were in the actual broadcast that was on in the car. I mean, it was, a bit of, media awakening or madness, but there's something about live that is magical like that. And also the bands, to a large part, rose to that occasion and put on performances that, were better than expected in many instances.
In the book about my father's place, there's a CD, and you really hear that.
Yeah,
you really hear that in the tracks that they selected to be part of the book in CD package. You definitely feel that. Yeah,
that's a great book.
Oh, it's a great book. And we did, and by the way, that's up on our YouTube site. We have the whole interview with Steve Rosenfield on that one.
Good.
So when the sound truck came in, what was actually in it? How did it work? Because that's like a great mystery to me.
We're lucky to have in the studio one of the engineers.
Just happens to be here
filming me. This is Peter Hedeman.
I don't know which camera to look in.
Yeah, don't even look at the camera. Peter was in the truck. So, Peter, you guys would get a call from me. Someone would get a call. I say, all right, this Tuesday night, the band called The Police are going to be on live. All right, so when the Police, so I'll see you guys for a sound check at what time, and you pick it up from there. What happens?
Just make sure you talk into the mic. Talk into the mic.
Talk to the mic. Come on.
Talk into the mic.
So what would happen? So that afternoon, you guys would pull up in a truck, right?
What was in the truck? Talk in the mic. Talk in the mic.
Talk in the mic.
You gotta get close.
We would go pick up the truck over in. Okay, let's start.
No, get closer. Get closer.
We would pick up the truck over by Manhasset Station and drive it to my father's place, and then run the snakes into the place, make sure tone was on the line back to the radio station.
Absolutely.
That we were still, because many times we were not.
I know.
Most importantly, to make sure we were in phase, because frequently we would go live, and as soon as we would go live, it would cut out and it would sound like this. And you didn't know
that was when we went out of phase.
So we had a special switch in the truck that we would flip and get back in phase.
Right.
So what was actually in the truck? How much equipment was there?
We had 2 Sound Workshop 1280 soundboards.
Cheesesteaks.
A pair of Nakamichi cassette machines, a reel-to-reel recorder.
Wow.
And a cassette machine behind the board that was semi-authorized.
But there was always a copy for the band at the end of the show.
That's really interesting.
Well, because, one, we always promised that. We always delivered it. And we delivered to them immediately afterwards. And in the case where we pre-recorded as opposed to just went live, the band's always had an option to call back and say, oh, man, we love doing it, but if you could lose this song because we were singing out of key or something. But that didn't happen that often. You know what? I think they always felt relieved that we gave them that option. But then, you know what? They were so happy with the way that it was handled. And I mean, these guys, I mean, I put poor Peter on the spot there, but these guys, man, they worked their butts off, and they really did a great job. And we had a variety of engineers and producers who just incredible work. And, these are 2-track recordings. These were not multi-tracks. So it was as it was forever and ever. Amen.
For you, what were some of the more memorable concerts?
There were, there were so many. There was the first one with Tommy Bolin because it was just so exciting and new, and we had to get Tommy on stage eventually because he was tempted so much. I mean, I remember Joe Perry from Aerosmith doing a show with us and being a total bitch, and then coming back and blowing the roof off the place. So something happened good before that. I remember Meatloaf. I thought Meatloaf collapsed in our live, Bat Out of Hell broadcast.
He did at St. John's when I saw him.
He collapsed back there. I thought, oh my God, he's dead. And then they run in with some oxygen, and he gets back up and goes, let's go. And I had to go back out and introduce him. I remember saving Johnny Winter from making a wrong turn and almost going in the garbage because there was a garbage dump at the back of the stage, and Johnny didn't see very well, and somebody had left him by himself. So all I thought about was bringing him on the stage, thinking, we almost had the major act just end up in a garbage pit in the back. So that was a little scary. One night, John Mayall was playing, and they put the monitors hanging for that show, but I didn't really realize it. When running out, Mayall had a lot of equipment. Went running out to do my intro, hit my head off the side of what it turned out to be was one of these hanging monitors, and then proceeded to give John Mayall this big introduction, because it was John Mayall, and if you know your British rock history, John Mayall's one of
Blues Breakers,
the incredible ones. And as I'm doing the introduction, I see some girls in the front row looking at me horrified. Because I don't know that, because I hit the thing, I have blood pouring down my face. And Mayall afterwards said, that was one of the greatest intros I've ever had. You lost blood for me on that intro. It was just amazing. And then there were magical nights, like Charlie Daniels did the Nassau Coliseum, and then came over and did a live show from my father's place with Papa John Creech from the Starship.
From the Starship, yeah, sure.
I mean, this was the same night that we just broadcast them from the Coliseum. They were just so many. The Ramones, we got rained out in this horrendous nightmare of an attempt at a boardwalk concert down at the beach in Long Beach, and the make good was the Ramones at my father's place for the people who couldn't see a show because it rained. And the Ramones concert that night was so magical that it may have been the ultimate rock concert ever done there. But then there was the night Peter Tosh showed up and everyone thought the Rolling Stones were coming. And that CD just got released recently.
I have a copy. Thanks,
Debbie.
Yeah,
terrific. Yeah. And so, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but we had, I remember Pat Metheny coming through there, Michael Franks, Mahavishnu, John McLaughlin, a lot of players that you wouldn't have, Stefan Grappelli, right? Yeah, I mean, we did Stefan Grappelli. I mean, we were, there was an amazing, and I remember Earl Scruggs getting a friend of his to come on stage to play piano for one track, and it's Billy Joel.
Wow.
Because he and Earl were buds. And I mean, we had the radio concert, and there's, the hottest pop star in the world there sitting, playing piano for Earl on one of Earl's songs. So it was just, it was a magical hub, and it was a great place for all kinds of music.
Well, things do come around, and maybe there'll be a resurrection. I mean, I know that LIR sort of lives right now on the internet.
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of incarnations of it. The movie and just what's been going on with music and the revolution of music in America, because music is still evolving. It's just, we've lost record companies, we've got the cloud, touring has changed in immense ways, and basically the way you make money has changed. It doesn't mean that money isn't being made. It is being made.
It's just being made differently.
Yes, it's being made very differently. There's tremendous inroads being laid there, and also, hopefully there will continue to be an understanding that there's very few things as valuable as a great live concert, or a great live performance, or a great artist in our lives.
Well,
and
said.
And you know what? As I talk about quite often, it comes down to songs. We got to go back to those 45s. We got to find the great songs, and then the great albums, the great collections, the great, whatever you want to call them now, playlists. But it's all about great songs.
Wow. And with that, this was a great show. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. And don't forget to see the movie, the WLIR movie, Dare to Be Different.
And as soon as the show's over, I'm going to Dennis's house to look at all the 45s.
There you go. Fair enough. Thanks for being here. Thanks to WCWP for being a great station.
And thanks for listening, everyone. See you next week.